In the depths of the Forbidden Woods, past the hidden cannon and the tangled nests of snake parasites, there is a dark, dilapidated windmill. The structure offers a brief reprieve from the oppressive foliage seen throughout the woods, though its interior is still very much suffocating. Navigating the wooden stairs to the top floor reveals a single open window. This window leads out to a small exterior balcony, and if you decide to drop down from that balcony, you are then met with a pretty unsettling scene. Scattered across the wooden shingles is a congregation of corpses. It is a family of Yanamites, torn apart and left to rot. In the center of this massacre rests a solitary figure. From a distance, it is just a man in rags, kneeling in a pool of blood. His head is bowed low. Given the context of the hunt, the initial assumption is that this is a terrified survivor. He appears paralyzed by the horrors around him, hunched over in desperate prayer, or perhaps weeping for the dead. Stepping closer shatters this illusion. The silence of the roof is broken by the wet, sickening sound of tearing flesh. The man is not praying, he is feeding, actively consuming one of the smaller bodies, which is unmistakably the corpse of a child. His physical appearance is wretched and severe. He is entirely gaunt, his ribs and collarbones pressing sharply against an ashen, sickly complexion. Filthy, tattered grey rags are wrapped carelessly around his wrist. A thick layer of soiled bandages tightly covers the upper half of his face, blinding him completely. His forearms and jaw are drenched in fresh, glistening blood. The sound of the hunter's boots on the roof breaks his focus. He halts his feast and recoils from the chewed body.
Whoa! Blimey, don't scare me like that. On a night like this, I took you for a monster. Oh, thank the stars, you're fairly normal. Was it you who put down that awful beast? Ooh, that thing had me trembling, frozen in my boots. And then you came along. Well, if you're a hunter, then would you know of any safe havens?
The psychological manipulation begins immediately. He is caught red-handed mutilating the remains of a child at his knees, yet he speaks with the casual, frightened cadence of a helpless victim. He projects his own monstrous nature onto the hunter, claiming he thought you were the threat. He constructs a fiction on the spot, claiming a phantom beast terrified him. There is no panic in his voice, no guilt, no attempting to wipe the blood from his mouth. His immediate concern is entirely calculating. By asking for a safe haven, he is probing the hunter for information. He recognizes a heavily armed killer standing before him, and instead of fighting, he uses polite deception to secure a map to his next meal. It is glaringly obvious that this individual is highly suspicious. First and foremost, he is actively consuming human remains. His physical appearance is far from normal, resembling a decaying corpse more than a surviving citizen. Yet during my initial encounter with him, I hesitated. Despite the visual evidence, he possessed one specific trait that complicated the situation. He spoke. In Yharnam, the beastly scourge strips men of their humanity, leaving them with nothing but shrieks, howls, and blind aggression. The beasts do not ask for directions. They do not hold polite, coherent conversations. Because this man retained his vocabulary and a calm demeanor, it caused me to withhold my judgment. I did not give the situation the immediate insight it warranted. If the player decides to engage with his request, the game presents a fork in the road. The first viable option is to send him to Iosefka's clinic. Directing the beggar to the clinic results in a quiet, abrupt conclusion to his arc. The imposter doctor residing within the clinic does not discriminate. If the hunter returns to the clinic later and infiltrates the back wards, they will not find the blind man resting on a cot. Instead, they will encounter another blue bulbous celestial minion wandering the halls. Striking this specific alien creature down yields a unique item, the Beast Rune. This confirms his identity. He is treated exactly like every other NPC sent to Iosefka. He's experimented on and transformed, completely neutralizing the threat he posed. Sending him to the clinic is effectively an execution. It solves the immediate problem of the cannibal on the roof, but it completely shields the player from the true extent of his deception. To investigate the true horror of the suspicious beggar, he must be granted access to a real sanctuary. He must be sent to Odin Chapel. If the hunter chooses to withhold the truth and directs the beggar to Odin Chapel, the tragic collapse of Yharnam's only true sanctuary begins. Before his arrival, the chapel served as a rare refuge. Thanks to the efforts of the chapel dweller, a small community forms inside its walls. The residents are a mix: the paranoid, skeptical man, a bitter old woman descending into dementia, a terrified church nun named Adela, and Ariana, a pragmatic woman of the night with forbidden bloodlines. Despite their prejudices, they are physically safe. The dweller maintains a constant burning of beast-repelling incense, creating an invisible barrier that the monsters roaming the cathedral ward cannot cross. Then, the beggar arrives. Unlike the other survivors who huddle near the incense burners, the beggar refuses to step foot inside the chapel. He positions himself in the courtyard just outside the main doors. When spoken to, he still maintains a quiet deception.
Ah, hello again. I owe this to you. It's a wonderful place. They even let beggars like myself in. What's better, we keep our distance. Don't step on anyone's toes, right? The way proper Yharnamites ought to live.
He frames his isolation as an act of courtesy. He plays the role of a humble vagrant who knows his place in society. The consequences of his presence do not manifest immediately. The game requires the player to leave the area, progress the night by slaying a boss, and return. Upon returning to the chapel, a massive dark pool of blood stains the floor where a resident once sat. The victim is entirely missing. The first to be consumed is always the skeptical man. There is a deliberate irony in his death. Since his arrival, the skeptical man has spent his time insulting the hunter and dispensing paranoid contrarian advice. His primary warning was to beware the blind man, referring to the harmless chapel dweller inside. He was so focused on the perceived threat of the chapel dweller that he completely missed the actual monster, which is the other blind man waiting just outside the door. If the hunter walks outside to question the beggar, he does not confess. Instead, he implicates the player in the crime.
Let me share something with you. My secret stash. Really prime stuff.
He hands the player a beast blood pellet. This item is formed from coagulated beast blood, used to induce a temporary state of feral strength. By giving this to the hunter immediately after an NPC vanishes, the game implies a horrific transaction. The beggar is butchering the residents the player worked to save, and he is paying the hunter a cut of the remains to turn a blind eye. To understand the weight of this exchange, we must examine the item itself. The official description for the beast blood pellet states, "Large pellets of coagulated beast blood, rips apart the flesh and grants the beasthood effect. The continuous allure of blood can bring out the beast within. The beggar is extracting the tainted blood of the Yharnamites and refining it into a consumable stimulant. He then offers this stimulant to the hunter to fuel their continued slaughter across the city. This mechanic forces a disturbing question upon the player. Who is truly hunting whom? As the hunter continues to leave the chapel and slay bosses, the methodical slaughter inside the sanctuary continues. The lonely old woman is the next to disappear. Her death is particularly cruel, occurring just as her paranoia breaks and she begins to view the hunter as her own child, venturing out to find sedatives to ease her burden. Sister Adela, the nun, follows. Her strict adherence to healing church dogma and her protective black church attire offer no physical defense against the beasts. With each disappearance, the blood pools on the chapel floor grow larger. Yet the beggar remains outside, his demeanor entirely unchanged. When approached after multiple murders, his dialogue shifts, revealing exactly how he views the hunter's repeated visits.
Oh, you again. Perfect timing. I've got some more. See? Oh my. You just can't get enough. Oh no, I understand. I'm the very same.
He views the hunter as a business partner. The beggar assumes that the hunter is a willing participant in the call. In his mind, the hunter is actively venturing out into Yharnam, finding survivors, and herding them into the chapel purely to keep his menu stocked. By returning to collect the beast blood pellets, the hunter validates this assumption. The beggar believes they share the same fundamental hunger. The only difference is that the beggar consumes flesh for sustenance, while the hunter consumes blood echoes and pellets for power. If the beggar manages to exhaust the supply of NPCs, he delivers a chilling line regarding his inventory.
Oh, hi. I'm afraid I don't have any more. Yeah, it's all sold out. Sorry, chum. But you know, I'll try and get some more soon. But you know, it ain't easy, right?
This entire sequence creates a bleak moral triangle between the player, the beggar, and the chapel dweller. While the beggar cleanly profits from the slaughter, the true psychological toll falls on the dweller inside. The dweller built the sanctuary. He pleaded with the hunter to spread the word. As his fragile community is systematically picked apart, he does not suspect the polite blind man outside, nor does he suspect the armed hunter. He blames himself.
A beast. Here. Why? It's my fault. Savaged and eaten everyone, and it's all my fault. Gods, please. I'm sorry. So sorry. I only wanted to help. Just once in my life. They told me it would never work. My mum always told me. Everybody kept telling me. I should have known. I should have.
The game uses this dynamic to strip away the illusion of the hunter's heroism. The hunter is ordained to slay beasts and protect humanity. Yet through action, the player turns Odin Chapel into a slaughterhouse. The player brings the livestock, the beggar executes them, and the player reaps the rewards to increase their own damage output. Eventually, the transaction must end. Whether driven by a late sense of morality, a desire to protect the remaining survivors, or simple curiosity, the hunter must draw a weapon and strike the polite man in the courtyard. Striking him shatters the entire illusion. The rags tear and the bandages snap. The man rapidly expands into a towering mass of muscle, fur, and kinetic energy. He transforms into an abhorrent beast. Before we even start our analysis, the specific name the developers chose for this creature, the abhorrent beast, the word abhorrent carries a precise double meaning, and the game weaponizes both definitions to brilliant effect. At a surface level, abhorrent means inspiring, disgust, and loathing, something that is physically repugnant. When the beggar transforms, this primary definition is immediately satisfied. The creature is a visual nightmare. Its chaotic mass of wiry hair, exposed flesh, and jagged, unnatural proportions make it physically revolting to look at. The player immediately accepts the name because the visual evidence demands it. However, the secondary definition of abhorrent refers strictly to the actions or behaviors that are morally unacceptable. Throughout the fight, the beast retains its ability to speak, and it uses that voice to interrogate the hunter's morality. He points out that the hunter slaughters the townsfolk indiscriminately and consumes their blood for power. The beggar justifies his own cannibalism as a necessity while framing the hunter's violence as a deliberate voluntary choice. By retaining his intellect and pointing out the hypocrisy of the hunt, the beggar shifts the context of the word. He forces us to question who the title truly belongs to. Is the abhorrent beast simply the physical monster we are fighting in the courtyard? Or is it a subtle moral judgment placed upon the hunter? If abhorrent behavior is defined as actions that are morally unacceptable, then the institution of the healing church, the mechanics of blood ministration, and the player's relentless slaughter are equally repugnant. The brilliance of the name is that it acts as a mirror. It applies perfectly to both combatants. This is not a standard Yharnam lycanthrope. The abhorrent beast is a creature of severe violence, manipulating localized wind currents and generating violent sparks of electricity within its movements. Most victims of the blood scourge in Yharnam follow a predictable anatomical regression. The citizens grow excess hair, their limbs stretch, and their skulls elongate into canine snouts. They become wolves. The abhorrent beast does not follow this rule. Its design is far more ancient and volatile. Let us analyze the silhouette. The creature is massively top-heavy. Its center of gravity is pulled upward into a hulking, overdeveloped chest and a thick, muscular neck. The arms are disproportionately long, extending well past the knees, forcing the creature to adopt a knuckle-dragging gait. Yet, these are not the paws of a wolf. The hands are tipped with thick, jagged talons. The texture of the beast is equally abrasive. The creature is covered not in soft animal fur, but in a chaotic mass of thick, wiry hair. Visually, it resembles charred roots of frayed steel cables. The hair juts out at sharp, irregular angles. Piercing through this dark, matted mane on the back and shoulders are several red, fleshy protrusions, looking almost like exposed bone or parasitic growths breaking through the skin. The face of the abhorrent beast is the true anchor of its horror. Unlike the scourge beasts prowling central Yharnam, the abhorrent beast lacks a snout. The fundamental anatomical structure of a human skull remains intact beneath the fur. The face is flat. It possesses a distinct flattened nose, a heavy pronounced brow ridge, and a jawline that, while stretched and filled with jagged teeth, looks undeniably humanoid. The eyes are perhaps the most vital component of the design. Set deep within the dark, heavily shadowed sockets of the brow, they glow with a piercing luminous red. In classical portraiture or realism, a well-placed highlight in the eye brings a subject to life. Here, the glowing red irises act as a focal point against the monochromatic grays and the blacks of the fur. When the creature speaks its dialogue, the jaw moves, and those red eyes lock onto the player, reinforcing the terrible truth. There is still a man operating this machine of flesh. Finally, we must observe the elemental layer of the design. The abhorrent beast does not merely possess physical strength, it generates localized electricity. Thin, erratic arcs of blue lightning course through the wiry fur, particularly during its aggressive lunges. In the visual language of Bloodborne, electricity is something that is heavily associated with Archibald, the eccentric inventor of the healing church, and his obsession with the dark beasts. More importantly, it is associated with Lauren, the ancient sand-buried land that fell to the beastly scourge long before Yharnam was built. The presence of this blue lightning suggests that he is not suffering from the common strain of the Yharnam blood. The physical evidence lies in the humanoid face. The electrical arcs points directly to a deeper, more profound infection. It visually supports the theory that the beggar is connected to the Chalice dungeons, to the old prospectors, and to a time when the beastly transformations were far more severe. By designing the abhorrent beast to retain a human face and a humanoid skeletal structure, the developers force the player to recognize the beggar's humanity even as they slaughter him. However, the true horror of this encounter lies in the audio. When a citizen of Yharnam succumbs to the scourge, their mind is typically the first casualty. They lose their language. It is reduced to guttural snarls and frantic shrieks. Even Father Gascoigne, a hardened veteran of the church, completely loses his vocabulary the moment his physical form breaks. The abhorrent beast shatters this fundamental rule. Despite the violent electrical surges and the monstrous anatomy, the creature speaks. His voice is clear, his diction is precise, and his tone is laced with absolute contempt. He does not just roar at the hunter, he interrogates them.
Have you got a screw loose? Or is it your animal intuition? You hunters have got more blood on your hands.
This initial line dismantles the righteous facade of the hunt. The beggar questions the underlying motive of the player. Is the hunter attacking him out of a calculated moral judgment, or simply because their programming demands violence against anything that registers as an enemy? By referencing animal intuition, the beggar suggests that the hunter operates on the exact same blind instinct as the monsters they are sworn to eradicate. You see a beast, you kill a beast. There is no thought, only reaction. If the player allowed the beggar to systematically consume the Odin Chapel residents before finally triggering the fight, his accusations become intensely specific and deeply philosophical.
Oh, you are a sick puppy. You drink the blood of half the town, and now this! And you talk of beasts! You hunters are the real killers!
Here, the core philosophy of Bloodborne shifts. The game actively turns the mirror upon the player. The beggar points directly to the central mechanic of the experience, blood ministration. To reach this point in the story, the hunter has slaughtered hundreds of afflicted townsfolk. They have consumed countless vials of blood stolen from corpses to sustain their own life. The beggar acknowledges this reality. The beggar killed a handful of people to survive. He ate flesh because his mutated, oversized biology demanded immense caloric intake. His actions were driven by the cruel necessity of his affliction. The hunter, conversely, slaughters indiscriminately. They patrol the streets, break into homes, and execute the sick to harvest echoes and increase their own power. The beggar recognizes this profound disparity. He categorizes the hunter as a superior predator operating under the legal guise of a profession. A tragedy of the encounter peaks as the fight nears its end, and the beggar grows desperate.
Die! 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 Hunters are killers, nothing less! You call me a beast? A beast? What would you know? I didn't ask for this.
This is the philosophical anchor of the suspicious beggar. His outburst directly echoes the ideology of Jura, the retired old hunter of Old Yharnam, who firmly maintained that the beasts are still people. The blood scourge is a disease. The beggar did not choose his transformation. He was infected. His body was forcefully transformed. His cannibalism, however horrific, is a symptom of this disease. The hunter's actions, however, are entirely voluntary. The player chooses to initiate the violence. The hunter chooses to sign the contract, enter the dream, and swing the weapon. When the abhorrent beast finally falls, his dying words offer a quiet conclusion to this debate. He does not grant himself absolution. He admits to his own wretched state and the horrific nature of his crimes. But he ensures the hunter is firmly included in the definition. The beggar leaves the player with a heavy realization. In Yharnam, the line between man and monster is defined solely by the willingness to shed blood. And in that regard, the beggar suggests the hunter evolved into a beast long before they ever set foot in the Forbidden Woods. Something that comes to mind when I look at the suspicious beggar is the fact that he is able to transform on command. Most beasts in Yharnam are victims. The transformation is an agonizing, involuntary collapse of the human form. When Vicar Amelia succumbs to the scourge in the Grand Cathedral, she clutches her golden pendant. The cleric beast on the bridge screams in agony. Their minds shatter long before their bodies do. The suspicious beggar presents a terrifying deviation. He possesses the ability to manipulate his physical form. It feels like he is a beast wearing a man as a camouflage. He maintains his human shape, his polite demeanor, and his blindness to move freely through the world and interact with his prey. He only sheds this disguise when physically threatened by the hunter. This level of mastery is entirely absent in the streets of Yharnam. It suggests that he has not fallen to the beasthood, but rather, he conquered it. This interrogation is further cemented by his ability to speak while transformed. Look closely at the anatomy of the abhorrent beast. The jaw is elongated, the teeth are jagged, and the skeletal structure is warped. By all logic, the vocal cords should be shredded, capable of producing nothing more than guttural roars. Yet his diction is perfect, his tone is clear. This retention of language is crucial. In classical philosophy, speech and reason are the primary dividers between man and animal. Aristotle argued that while animals have voice to indicate pain or pleasure, humans have speech to indicate what is just and unjust. By allowing the abhorrent beast to speak, Bloodborne blurs this line completely. The beggar is using human language to articulate a moral argument against the hunter. He is using the very tool of humanity to condemn humanity. To understand where this unique strain of the scourge comes from, we must look at the sparks flying from his fur. The abhorrent beast generates localized electricity. In the lore of Bloodborne, blue lightning is not a natural element of Yharnam. It is an entirely foreign attribute. It is heavily associated with a land that fell to the beastly scourge centuries ago, Lauren. The item descriptions for the bolt paper in the Tonitrus tells us of Archibald, the eccentric inventor of the healing church. Archibald was obsessed with the blue sparks of the dark beasts. Dark beast Paarl, found in the Gaul below the city, shares this exact elemental trait. But more importantly, if a hunter ventures into the chalice dungeons, specifically the ailing Lauren chalices, they will find the ancient sand-buried ruins of a civilization entirely consumed by the scourge. And the apex predator roaming these ruins is the abhorrent beast. This visual evidence points to a chilling conclusion. The beggar is not suffering from the common strain of Yharnam blood distributed by the healing church. He carries the Lauren strain. He is connected to the old prospectors who charted the tombs of the gods. The Lauren sickness is far older and far more profound. This ancient affliction might explain his lucidity. The beasts of Lauren have existed for centuries. Perhaps they have evolved past the initial madness of the infection. His behavior forces us to compare the beggar to classical monsters of literature and folklore. He shares striking similarities with the Wendigo of Algonquin folklore. The Wendigo is a spirit of cannibalism and endless hunger that roams the freezing woods. Crucially, the Wendigo is known to mimic human voices, calling out for help to lure isolated travelers into the dark. The beggar uses the exact same tactic. He sits on a rooftop surrounded by the dead and politely asks a heavily armed hunter for directions to a safe haven. He uses the human instinct for charity as a weapon. Before we move on to the literary analysis, there is a rather weird anomaly that I observed. If the hunter ignores the forbidden woods roof and waits until after defeating Rom, the vacuous spider, to investigate, the beggar is gone. He vanishes entirely from the playthrough. This is a deliberate choice by the developers to signal a shift in the game's genre. The first half of Bloodborne is a gothic horror story about a medical plague. It is about men turning into wolves and the collapse of a city's social order. The suspicious beggar represents the absolute pinnacle of this earthly horror. He is the most evolved beast you can ever find in the world of Bloodborne. He can switch forms from beast to that of a man, or the other way around in command. He has the strength and power of a beast, yet he still retains his intellectual side, where he is fully able to speak in the beast's form and question the morality of the hunter. But once Rome falls and the blood moon is revealed, the game shifts abruptly into cosmic horror. The true threat is no longer the beasts in the streets, but the great ones manipulating reality. Yet the questions the beggar raised linger long after the sky turns purple. If the hunter continues their journey and achieves the secret ending, childhood's beginning, they consume 3/3 of umbilical cord, defeat the moon presence, and transcend humanity to become an infant great one. This ending retroactively proves the beggar's accusations were correct all along. The hunter was never a human acting on behalf of other humans. The hunter was an entity actively shedding its humanity, slaughtering its way to the top of the cosmic food chain to achieve a higher state of being. When the beggar asked, "You call me a beast?" what would you know? He was highlighting the hunter's detachment. The hunter leaves human morality behind to ascend, making them far more alien and far more dangerous than the suspicious beggar. But to truly grasp the narrative weight of the suspicious beggar, we must expand upon some literary parallels. Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a crucial comparison, as Stevenson's novel stems from a man who is in a desperate losing battle for control over himself, which in Yharnam can be compared to a human resisting the beastly scourge. In the novel, Dr. Henry Jekyll is a civilized moral man who creates a chemical compound to separate his good nature from his primal suppressed desires. The resulting entity, Edward Hyde, is a manifestation of pure malice. For Jekyll, Hyde is a separate disease. Hyde is an addiction that eventually grows too strong, trapping the Doctor inside his own body. The tragedy of the novel is watching the human soul fight a losing war against its own inner darkness. When we encounter the suspicious beggar in the Forbidden Woods, that internal war is already over, and the human soul did not just lose. It was consumed, digested, and repurposed. With the beggar, Mr. Hyde is in absolute control. The beast is the core operating system. The tragedy has already occurred long before the hunter ever climbs that windmill. To deepen this literary analysis, we must look at Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In modern pop culture, Frankenstein's monster is often reduced to a mindless groaning brute with bolts in his neck. But in Shelley's original 1818 novel, the creature is highly intelligent, articulate, and deeply philosophical. The true horror for Victor Frankenstein occurs when they confront each other at the top of the Alps. The creature demands that Victor answer for his actions. He articulates his own suffering, pointing out the cruel injustice of being brought into a world that violently rejects him solely for his physical appearance. The monster says to his creator, "I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind?" The suspicious beggar forces the exact same confrontation upon the hunter. When the rags tear away and the blue lightning arcs across the courtyard, the hunter expects the mindless howling of a cleric beast or a blood-starved beast, except they are met with a monster similarly to Shelley's monster. The abhorrent beast uses his voice to shatter the binary illusion of what a good human and what an evil monster is. During the fight, the beggar screams a line that perfectly encapsulates the tragedy of Shelley's creation.
You call me a beast? A beast? What would you know? I didn't ask for this.
This is the agonizing core for both characters. Frankenstein's monster did not ask to be stitched together from corpses and jolted into existence. The suspicious beggar did not ask to be infected with the Lauren strain of the blood scourge. He was likely a church hunter, or perhaps a chalice prospector who pushed too far into the labyrinth and contracted a curse. He is acutely aware of his wretched state. He knows he is a cannibal, but he is also aware that his actions are instinctively dictated by his curse. By contrast, the hunter's presence in Yharnam is entirely voluntary. The hunter willingly traveled to the city, willingly signed the contract, and willingly consumed the blood to gain power. Just as Frankenstein's monster confronts Victor with moral weight, similarly, the beggar also confronts the hunter with their moral weight. This philosophical confrontation between a monster and a monster hunter is a rare narrative device that is incredibly effective. To understand its impact, we can look at a similar execution in another dark fantasy setting, The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. In the quest titled Skellige's Most Wanted, Geralt of Rivia is lured into an elaborate trap. When he arrives at the ambush point, he does not find human bandits. He is confronted by a coalition of sentient monsters: a Doppler, a Godling, a Troll, and a Werewolf. They do not attack him immediately. Instead, they put Geralt on trial. They accuse him of being a bloodthirsty butcher who kills their kind indiscriminately for coin. The werewolf acts as the prosecutor, demanding that Geralt justify his slaughter. In The Witcher, the player has a defense. Geralt can cite specific examples from past quests where he spared monsters that were not harming humans. He can prove that he is a professional who eliminates threats if the player has made merciful choices. The monsters acknowledge his code, and Geralt can walk away without shedding blood. In Bloodborne, the suspicious beggar holds the exact same trial. He puts the hunter on the stand. You drink the blood of half the town, and now this? And you talk of beasts. You hunters are the real killers. But unlike Geralt of Rivia, the hunter has no defense. Bloodborne offers no non-lethal takedowns. There are no dialogue trees to negotiate a truce. The mechanics of the game demand violence. To progress, to level up, and to survive, the player must slaughter everything in their path. The player breaks into homes, invades ancient tombs, and kills beings that are actively retreating or defending their territory. When the beggar accuses the hunter, he is breaking the fourth wall. He is addressing the player's mechanical loop. The player cannot point to a moment of mercy because the game does not allow it. The beggar exposes the hypocrisy of the hunter's contract. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." The hunter gazes into the abyss of Yharnam, but they do not merely stare, they consume it. They inject the abyss into their veins. The suspicious beggar is the abyss gazing back and speaking. He forces the player to recognize that their actions are not divine intervention. The hunt is simply a turf war between two rival predators. One predator operates in the shadows, eating flesh out of biological necessity. The other predator operates in the open, killing by choice, sanctioned by a corrupt institution, and driven by a thirst for blood echoes. When the abhorrent beast finally falls and delivers his dying breath, he does not ask for forgiveness. He merely confirms the reality of the world. The suspicious beggar is the most horrifying NPC in Bloodborne because he is the only character who looks at the hunter and tells them the absolute truth. Thank you for watching this investigation. The themes examined in this video are a bit different than the physical lore I've explored so far, so if you want to see more content analyzing the psychological or From Software characters, please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Fear the old lore. Until next time, fear the old blood.